The race starts at 3:30 p.m. on Fox Eastern.
This is a good track for you.
Is it?
6 straight top 10 finishes.
Oh, my.
Yeah.
But that 88 is pulling away.
Earnhardt, Johnson, Menard, Blaney, third-generation star Dale Earnhardt Jr. brings him to the flag. Checkered flag waving. It's over. It's Earnhardt. Earnhardt trying to cover all spots.
Oh, yeah! Good job, Junebug.
Dale Earnhardt Jr. Checkered flag at Talladega.
Why is this one so much fun? Because your grin told so many stories on your cool-down lap.
It's just real emotional. I haven't won here in a long time. It was my daddy's birthday a couple days ago. Just real emotional, man.
My nerd world.
And welcome to it. I'm your host, Jon Justice, for this week's Dale Jr. race preview as we head to the, jet fighters in a gymnasium. Usually at some point somebody makes that comment for Bristol this weekend. Unfortunately, we're under threat of rain all weekend long, and that's no fun, although we have kind of skirted having to deal with those issues so far this year. It'll be a rather shorter podcast this week for the Dale Jr. race preview, simply because we've had an off week. There isn't a ton of news to really get to, and in terms of the race preview, it's pretty simple. So we'll dive into that here in just a few minutes. If you haven't had the opportunity, be sure you go and check out Dirty Mo Radio and the Dale Jr. download. The past 2 weeks, Dale Jr. has done his weekly podcast, but he's done them with his fiancée, Amy. Not a ton of racing information. I mean, there is, but I mean, considering it was an off week, I'm kind of surprised that he even bothered to podcast. But if you want a good listen, both of the podcasts, last week's and this week's for the Dale Jr. download, were enjoyable. He talked a bit about Bristol. We will get into some of the comments that he's made about Bristol and the expectation again for this weekend coming up. But again, if you have the opportunity to go and listen to the Dirty Mo Radio Dale Jr. download, be sure to go and check that out. I hate off weeks. I really do. I mean, I know we need to have them, and I know the drivers and the teams need them, and you know, for good reason. It being Easter last weekend, I get it. But coming off of Texas, man, I hope we don't lose the little bit of momentum that we got after the top five at Texas a couple of weekends back. And just to talk briefly about that race, that was a weird one. With the repave at Texas, I see the potential for the track to be better in the long term. I kind of know what they were going for, but it was just a weird race with how squirrely all the cars were, how long it took the upper groove to come in. I mean, I will say that all things considered, it went probably the best that it was going to go, considering the fact that the track had just been repaved. They ended up, having a second groove in turns 3 and 4 towards the end of the race, which made things interesting. But it was just, it's one of those races where, the track's brand new and everybody has to hug the bottom, and it's really difficult for them to make any moves. It reminded me quite a bit of when they were doing the tandem restrictor track racing. That's what it reminded me of the most, when the cars were hooked up 2 by 2, and that's the only way they could go anywhere. It seemed very gimmicky. And the race last weekend kind of, I don't want to say gimmicky is not the right word as we compare it to Texas, but I will say that it was a different kind of racing. You had to get the guy loose to kind of get him out of the way, and there wasn't a lot of room to move. So, look, Dale Jr. got a top 5, had a good car, fought till the end. We needed that finish. We're up to, I think, 20th or 20th, I think 20th in the points now. Based off of that alone, we still have a little ways to climb. And again, with the off weekend coming when it did, I guess there's pluses and minuses. The good news is that we're heading to Bristol. And Bristol's a place where Junior has done well. It's one of his favorite tracks. Unfortunately, and we'll get a little ahead of ourselves. But unfortunately, because of the rain this weekend, they ended up washing out qualifying, and so he's going to be starting 20th. But even as he tweeted after that happened, he wasn't all that interested in qualifying, and said that he had started further back and won the race before. I would have liked a better starting position and the opportunity to have a better starting position, but at the same time, it takes out one element, and starting 20th isn't horrendously bad. So we'll talk a little bit more about how the car is. Practice has wrapped up for the weekend, and waiting for the Xfinity race to start here, and I'll let you know what my prediction is for Dale Jr. The only thing to mention on the merchandise front is there are some new items at NASCAR.com, but they're more of office items, iPhone cases, and iPad cases, things of that nature. Not a ton when it comes to T-shirts or merchandise. There is a new paint scheme that was unveiled, and it was a Mountain Dew paint scheme. I don't think that it's the Mountain Dew paint scheme, although I'm beginning to wonder if for the select races that Dale Jr. is running with Mountain Dew as a sponsor, if they're not all going to be one-off paint schemes. I don't think that we're going to have, when I was looking at the schedule before I started the podcast and looking at the paint schemes, they don't, not all the races are filled in yet. They've got quite a few of them now. And I was surprised that the Exalta paint scheme was running as often as it was. But be that as it may, we're back in the standard nationwide paint scheme this weekend. But looking at the races that Mountain Dew is scheduled to run, I'm sensing that it's going to end up being like it was last year, where all the paint schemes are going to be very specific promotional paint schemes and not a straight-up, sort of Mountain Dew standard paint scheme, which, I'm kind of okay with. It's a bummer from the standpoint that I like to wear, as I've mentioned many times, I like to wear the shirt and the hat that matches the paint scheme for that weekend. And so if they keep changing that paint scheme, then it's going to end up costing me a lot of money, or I just won't bother doing that. That being said, they did reveal one particular paint scheme. He's going to run this Mountain Dew paint scheme in Kansas, and it's available if you want to look at it. It's in the notes for the, if you're listening to this on Podbean, it's in the notes on Podbean. It might pop up on iTunes too. I'm not sure. But it is it's a promotional paint scheme to run at Kansas in a couple of weeks, and it's Mountain Dew SA. So they're doing a riff on USA, right? So Mountain Dew SA. It's a pretty nice looking paint scheme. It's baby blue with some white trails on these, red, white, and blue stars. The stars are red. The trails on it are white with blue. It's got a baby, sort of a baby blue tint to it. It's essentially a red, white, and blue paint scheme, but the colors are more, are more akin to Easter colors, I would say. It looks cool. I don't think that it's a paint scheme that Dale Jr. himself necessarily designed. It doesn't look like one that I would think is paying homage to any former paint schemes, but it's a clean looking paint scheme. The color blue looks really sharp, and the graphics on it look nice. So I'll probably, when I saw it, I was like, oh, I wouldn't mind having a t-shirt of that. So if they put something up and make it available in time for the race, I may go and purchase a t-shirt that matches this particular paint scheme. But unfortunately, and for those that are newer to the podcast or haven't heard this before, they don't do a very good job of putting up the merchandise for the special paint schemes, the promotional paint schemes, before the race. It doesn't happen very often. I've been waiting for the Darlington paint scheme to pop up, because usually that one, being the throwback weekend, is the one that they put up pretty early and allow you to get some merchandise for. At least they did last year. And I haven't seen it yet. And I also expect a special paint scheme for the All-Star race as well, and I haven't seen that either. There isn't any available for this Mountain Dew paint scheme yet. I just looked before I started the podcast. So again, if you want to go and check it out for yourself, you can do that by going to the Jon Justice My Nerd World Podbean one, depending on where you're listening to it. It's available there. It's also on my feed. If you look at my photos on on Twitter at Jon Jon Justice. You can find it. You can find it there as well. So let's get to the race preview portion and my prediction for this weekend's race. Again, we're going to keep the podcast shorter than usual, just because there isn't a ton of news to talk about. Dale Jr. His practice has just been okay. He's not necessarily stupid fast, and he's not necessarily super slow. He's kind of right there in the middle. First practice, I know he mentioned that the car wasn't good, and they made some adjustments. This was yesterday. And Greg Ives made some adjustments to the car, and Dale Jr. liked it a lot. Today, on the speed chart, he's been solid. In final practice, he was top 10. Again, you can't really look at the speeds in practice on the speed chart, but I mean, it was enough for him to turn a decent lap. In the first practice today, let me pull that up here real quick. In the first practice, yeah, he had a fifth fastest time. His average 10 lap average was 25th. In final practice, his 10 lap average was 18th? That's a little bit deceiving though too, because you run laps so fast that you need to look at sort of longer than 10 lap averages, and usually Dale Jr. will put out a 15-20 lap run, and to see what the average is, that gives us a better gauge. He has not done that yet today. He did tweet out earlier today that some drivers were noticing that the cars were hugging the bottom of the track. And Junior said, "I don't mind the bottom at all. The current pace is quick. If it slows a bit more for the race, it'll be reminiscent of the old Bristol." And for those that remember, the past couple of Bristol races, the top has been the fastest part of the track. You couldn't do anything on the bottom, and the guys were just riding the tops in both turns 1, 2, 3, and 4. So if they got the bottom working, then at least that provides some opportunity for the track to be a little bit more competitive, and hopefully on the restarts, not making it so important where you start, top or bottom, which was certainly the case, and obviously Texas is a different race, but that was certainly the case in Texas a couple of weekends ago. It was, if you got stuck on the outside in Texas, you were in big trouble until towards the end of the race. And Bristol has been the same thing. You want to start on the outside to take the outside going into turns 1 and 2. So if the bottom is working, then at least on the restarts, you've got a better opportunity to keep your position, regardless of whether or not you're stopping on the inside or the outside. So listen, based on the lap averages, without any further details, going back to sort of the momentum part of it, I'm going to throw out a top 10 for Junior. I'm not really confident saying top 5. I could, based on the fact that Dale Jr. is so good at Bristol, but I'm just not seeing it in the car, and based off some of the frustration that I was reading on Twitter, some of the chatter during practice, he didn't seem like he was all that happy with the car. But being that it's Bristol, if we can stay out of trouble and we, don't make any mistakes, and the pit crew does a good job, then I think we can walk out of there with a top 10. I wish that I had more to share with you this week, but that's basically all the information that I've got. So hopefully the race isn't affected by rain tomorrow. Thankfully, there's lights, and hopefully NASCAR will do everything it can to get the race in tomorrow, so we don't have to run it on a Monday. Interesting note on that, though. NASCAR has said that they will move the race up an hour with 24 hours notice. So I haven't heard any comment yet about that, but I also haven't looked at the forecast to see when it is supposed to rain tomorrow. It seems to be coming and going, and Bristol being as small as it is, at least provides the opportunity for them to dry it quickly. So hopefully that's not a factor. I hope that I'm wrong in my prediction and Dale Jr. comes back with something better than a top 10, but that's the only thing that I'm confident in giving him for this week. So that's it for this week's podcast. Thanks again for checking it out. It is available on Podbean, Stitcher, iTunes, Spreaker, and YouTube as well. And I'm working on something pretty special for the show. Let's just say I went out and bought some equipment, some lights, and looking at changing up at least what gets posted on YouTube. We may have the podcast available in audio and video form soon. So I don't think I'll have it up and running for next week, but hopefully in the next few weeks, maybe for the All-Star race, there might be a visual component for not just the Dale Jr. Race Preview podcast, but also for the Depeche Mode and the Star Wars podcast as well. So be looking out for that. As always, if you want to drop me an email, you can do that at talkshownerd@gmail.com, talkshownerd@gmail.com. That's available in the notes, along with the photo of the special Mountain Dew SA paint scheme. So until next week, have yourself a great race Sunday or Monday, depending. And we'll talk to you again next week. Go Junior!
My nerd world.
And finally, for the most unusual pre-race prayers you will ever hear.
Heavenly Father, we thank you tonight for all your blessings. You said in all things give thanks. So we want to thank you tonight for these mighty machines that you've brought before us. Thank you for the Dodges and the Toyotas. Thank you for the Fords. And most of all, we thank you for Roush and Yates partnering to give us the power that we see before us tonight. Thank you for Jim Performance Technology and the RO7 engines. Thank you for Sunoco Racing Fuel and Goodyear tires to bring performance and power to the track. Boogity, 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 amen. Boogity, 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 amen. Bless the drivers and use them tonight. Boogity, 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 amen. Lord, I want to thank you for my smoking hot wife tonight, Lisa. My two children, Eli and Emma, or as we like to call them, the little E's. Lord, I pray you bless the drivers and use them tonight. May they put on a performance worthy of this great track. In Jesus' name, boogity, 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 amen. Boogity, 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 amen. Boogity, 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 amen. Bless the drivers and use them tonight. Lord, I want to thank you for my smoking hot wife. Boogity, 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 amen. Boogity, 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 amen. Bless the drivers and use them tonight. Lord, I want to thank you for my smoking hot wife.
The race starts at 3:30 p.m. on Fox Eastern.
This is a good track for you.
Is it?
6 straight top 10 finishes.
Oh, my.
My nerd world.